Hello and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Jill Bodensteiner, Director of Athletics at St. Joseph's University. As leaders, it's really important that we're clear regarding our goals and our vision and how those integrate into the greater university goals. We also need to collectively create a strategy and a culture that are going to help us reach our goals. This is an evolving exercise that requires an openness to continuous improvement. That's why I follow the One Question Leadership Podcast, because I love learning as much as I possibly can from my colleagues that helps me be the best that I can be. So my message for the day, keep learning, keep leading.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and review 1Q wherever you listen to podcasts. Our guest today is Frank Pucher. Frank is the Senior Associate Athletic Director for External Relations at Fresno State. Greetings, Frank. Thanks for joining me, and also thanks for having me here on campus.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ty. It's a pleasure.
Frank, I want to talk to you a little bit about leadership in external relations. The setup here is a little different. You don't have development under external relations. You do have revenue generation, right? Which there's a separation here, but development is its own kind of situation here at Fresno State. Talk to us a little bit about that coming into here. And then, of course, before here, you were Deputy Athletic Director there at Southern Utah. So you come in with some experience. Terry Toomey brings you in when he gets here to Fresno State, and talk to us a little bit about your external relations setup.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it is a little bit of a unique structure, I suppose, in that we do have a separate entity. Our Bulldog Foundation oversees our fundraising arm of athletics. And then, of course, we're a Learfield IMG school on the corporate sponsorship side as well. And so in my role, in terms of the revenue generating pieces, it's the ticket office, it's overseeing the relationship with Learfield IMG, any of our media partnerships in town, of course, our licensing arm as well. And then, of course, we all have to work so closely together, as you know. But so between our Bulldog Foundation, our Learfield IMG partners, myself and my team on the ticketing side and the marketing side, communication, and all the other pieces, while I guess separate silos, we're all together in the mission and what we're trying to accomplish and how we're presenting that to our community and what information we're trying to get out there. And so very closely aligned with those folks and great relationships, but all ultimately with the same goal of pushing this place forward. But yeah, you mentioned Southern Utah, a little bit different there, of course, at the FCS level, just from a resource standpoint or from a human resource standpoint, the structures are a little different. And so I 100% am blessed and honored that I had those opportunities at schools like Drake and Southern Utah, because you learn to wear so many different hats, right? And at the time, even though you're kind of running in a million directions and doing a million different things, that experience is invaluable looking back on it, right? Because I've done a lot of those things, and not that there's anything wrong with coming up through perhaps the Power 5 route. But in my experience, folks who come up that direction perhaps are a little bit more siloed in their day-to-day oversight or what they accomplish each day. And so I feel blessed that my career has taken me down a path where you're exposed to so many different areas of an athletic department, and specifically the external areas, and feel like it's led me and prepared me for where I am today.
Right. Yeah. Or Terry wouldn't have brought you here if he didn't,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Thinking about one of your stops as you were coming up, you actually worked for Learfield prior to the Learfield IMG merger, but you worked and had that experience of probably sponsors, activating sponsorships and those types of media rights and those types of things. I wonder if that still informs some of the decisions you make in your relationship with that entity here at Fresno State.
Absolutely. No, absolutely it does. I think it's a blessing. You never know when you set out in anything in life, where at the time, where and how that's going to come back later in your life, right? And that's one of those experiences that being on that side of the ledger, you learn how the inner workings happen there. You learn, a ton about the revenue pieces and the sales pieces and kind of the corporate goals or corporate relationship pieces. And so when you get then internal into a department where it's more perhaps about supporting our student athletes, advancing our brand, putting on a good show for the fans, all those things you keep in the back of your mind. How does this impact our corporate partners? How does this impact our revenue generating aspects? Because that's important, right? And we're all, as I look at my team, you have creative types, you have our marketing folks, you have our graphic design team. I mean, you have so many different people who are invaluable and they do great work. But perhaps that piece that never triggers in their minds is, well, how do we monetize this? How do we bring money? And ultimately that is important, right, to do what we're doing. And so For me, having that background, I think helps just kind of tie it back to, how ultimately does this help push our department forward?
One thing I wonder, in your previous stop, you were deputy athletic director, and you look at a stop like that and you look at what you're doing now, it looks like being an AD is in your future, right? One of the goals you want to hit while you're in the industry. I wonder about what you learned in the process of being a deputy, what you're learning now working with Terry here at Fresno State. And is that leading towards a leadership philosophy for at some point running your own
Sure,
program?
sure. That's a good question. And I think, similar to Terry's philosophy and obviously being with him for the last 2.5 years and listening to him on a daily basis, it's about the people, right? And it's about the relationships and investing in people. And both for myself, being invested in over the years and soaking up what I've learned from other administrators over the years, and then now giving some of that back to the folks I oversee. That's truly what it's all about. And I've heard you, Ty, talk about how leadership is truly about creating an environment that people want to be a part of. It's funny, I didn't even know that you said that as your mantra, but we talk about that a lot on my team. Not quite the exact same phrase, but we talk about creating in an environment that creates creativity, and there's a lot of creates in there, right? But for us externally, it's what I've learned over the years is, for myself, it's hard for me to explain to someone, well, what do you actually do on a daily basis? Because it's so much less about what I'm actually doing. I'm not the one actually creating the graphic or doing the video or whatever, right? But it's more about the investment in people and steering them in the right direction and empowering them, giving them the platform to be creative and to do great ideas. Of course, at the end of the day, I have to oversee that and push it forward and align us with our strategic goals for the department and the overall institution. But that investment in people, that empowering in people, allowing them to be successful, putting them in positions to be successful, allowing them to voice what creativity they have, I think that's been really important for our external efforts, because everyone brings different goals and different backgrounds and different viewpoints to the table, right? And so having that ability to truly try and invest and empower in staff, I think, is what's helped me get to where I'm at, and the success we've been having here at Fresno State externally.
Yeah, excellent. I'll ask a couple questions here and then we'll wrap. Specifically about that creativity. Talk to us a little bit about that, especially when you talk about external relations. You talk about sponsorships and revenue generation, and at some schools you talk about development and fundraising, but you're also talking about content creation, right? You're also talking about social media. You're also talking about digital media. You're also talking about film and graphic design and those types of things. Talk about that type of creativity, because I have a friend of mine hosts a podcast called the Sports Creators Podcast, and he talks about how it's not always valued, but is actually probably one of the most important things in the department. So talk to us about how you run that here at
Absolutely,
Fresno State.
Ty, there's zero doubt in that. I would almost argue that our historic model, needs to be flipped on its head. And that, by that I mean that a lot of places historically, you have your full-time staff in revenue generating areas, or in, for an external staff, in your SID area or whatever the case may be, and you kind of filled in the gaps with interns in those creative roles, or with young people or GAs or whatever the case may be. That area, that creative area, just to label it all in one area, I guess, I would argue is, externally only. Of course, in our overall department, the developing young people is way more important. But in the external areas, I would argue that's perhaps our most important area now. And what that does, we all of us in life, we spend so much time on our phones or on social platforms or in the community, that the perception that you create and the stories you tell and the brand that you advance and create digitally and socially is incredibly important, far more important than a lot of the other things that we historically did. In fact, we talked yesterday as a staff about being comfortable letting go of what we've usually done, and instead realigning and investing what the world is nowadays, right? And aligning that with consumer behavior. Just as a silly example, I mean, perhaps historically, a billboard would have made a lot of sense if you were talking about branding here in Fresno or in the community or in the Valley. I would argue that makes zero sense for us now, right? I mean, now instead, what you're doing on social media, what you're doing on digital platforms, how you get in front of people with data and all those other things technology-wise is incredibly important. And so I guess what I'm saying is, obviously you can't just flip everything and realign resources overnight at an institution, but investing in that creative piece has been a goal of mine since I got here. And that's where, again, I think it's almost like we need as much full-time staff in that area, as much resource development in that area, and we could fill in the gaps in some of those historic other areas that we used to just think were more important. And so it's incredibly important. It's something we talk about all the time, that especially as we see NIL coming into the picture and other pieces, and as the world continues to evolve rapidly, you have to be on the forefront of the creative and digital media piece.
Which is excellent. Tell me that mantra again you have with your group.
Create an environment that creates creativity.
Create an environment that creates creativity, which is excellent. And I'm sure Fresno State is happy to have you here. And it sounds like the people who work for you, when the boss appreciates creativity, they understand the resources needed to be creative, right? So
that's right. Yeah, no, they appreciate that they have the freedom and the artistic freedom to dream up what could truly help push us forward.
Well, Frank, this has been an excellent conversation, and I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Appreciate it, Ty.
That was Frank Pucher, and he is the Senior Associate Athletics Director for External Relations here at Fresno State. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.